Hello, my name is JP Bradley, and I will be presenting on keeping protected health information, or PHI, and confidential employee information safe. Employers obtain so much data on an employee during the new hire process and continuously throughout their employment. We as employees must trust our employers to properly handle this information and keep it safe from being used illegally and in ways that would adversely affect our careers or our personal lives. As a manager or an agent for a corporation, we can help eliminate certain breaches just by knowing the rules that are applicable to employment. Rules such as the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996, or HIPAA, Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, or the ADA, the Family Medical Leave Act of 1993, or FMLA, the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, and all state laws. Each of these laws require sensitive information to be shared within a corporation to eliminate discriminatory practices. However, understanding what specific information needs to be shared will help reduce the potential of a violation, as well as making sure information is transmitted securely and disposed of appropriately. I am a labor relations manager, and part of that requires me to share data with an employee's immediate supervisor. For instance, if employees have absences that will be covered under the Family Medical Leave Act, I am required to share that information with the supervisor, but I have to be very careful on how I share the information, and not all of the information regarding the employees illnesses or the reasoning behind why they are approved for FMLA needs to be given to the manager. So part of a few questions that we can ask ourselves whenever we are dealing with similar situations, we would ask, why is the data being asked for? Can we achieve the purpose without the data being transmitted electronically? Is the data being collected in a secure way? And are we using appropriately secure means to send it? Examples of protected health information are as follows. You have names, all geographic subdivisions smaller than a state, such as a county, a locality, or a city. All elements of dates except for the year. This would include maybe the new hire date, maybe a retirement date, birth date, marriage date, anything that can uniquely identify a certain person. And then there are telephone and fax numbers, email addresses, social security numbers, and the rest of the list here. And again, these are all information that can link to a specific person. Here is a simple video identifying guidelines for dealing with confidential and PHI.
Guidelines for dealing with confidential information. Number 1. Safeguard your username, password, and any other access credentials you have for systems and applications that deal with confidential information. Number 2. Protect mobile devices such as smartphones, tablets, and USB drives that contain confidential information. Number 3. Never leave your computer unattended when confidential information is on the screen. Number 4. Before transmitting confidential information to others, be sure that the transmission complies with the law and our privacy and security policies, the recipient has a legitimate business purpose for the information, you're sending no more information than is needed by the recipient, and finally, you're sending the information in a protected manner, such as encrypted, when called for by our policies or the law. Number 5. retain or destroy confidential information contained in our records in accordance with our record management policy. Number 6. Report any security incidents or privacy breaches that you observe or become aware of as soon as possible. We hope that this will give you a better understanding of the methods required for dealing with confidential information. Thank you.
Now we will review what are the threats to personal data. There are both internal and external threats. The first two items will be internal and the last few will be external. Malicious actors. These are those people who are willing to compromise the security of protected health information or confidential information for their own personal gain. The next internal would be human error, and this would simply be sending the wrong attachment or using the wrong email address and maybe even failing to encrypt an email when sending out. Start of the external would be phishing attacks, would be stolen or lost devices. And when we have a stolen or a lost device and a person gains access and is able to extract PHI, then we would certainly have a breach in that case. You also have hackers. Whenever you have maybe you're at an airport or you are at a remote location logging into your corporation's databases and you're not using a secured line like a VPN, then people can, while you're sending information back and forth, can hack in and access that data. And lastly, it would be malware. This is a simple diagram which helps us ask the right questions to discern whether or not a breach has actually occurred. The first question was protected health information involved, and the examples would include whether or not information fell into the wrong person's hands, and that information included names, social security numbers, and maybe even an address and birth date. Obviously, if the answer to that is yes, then this is a suspected breach. The second question was the protected health information unsecured, and that would be an example of whether maybe somebody sent you an email, you printed a sheet of paper, and when you were finished with it, you failed to shred it, or you passed on information without redacting it. And of course, the last one would be sending an email that is unencrypted. If this type of information was passed along, and then yes, this could be a suspected breach as well. And then the last question was the protected health information unlawfully disclosed or used. An example would be an employee reviewing a family member's file. Was PHI being sold? And was there unlawful disclosure of genetic information, and or potentially when PHI has been stolen? If this occurred, then yes, this is a suspected breach as well. Unfortunately, breaches do happen, and this is a list of the top 10 HIPAA breaches over the past few years. And the top of the list is a breach that occurred with Anthem, and that involves 78.8 million people. And in the far right here is just a little snapshot where Anthem had to pay $16 million to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services for the taking corrective actions to settle the potential violations of the HIPAA Act. And lastly, we will have some topics for discussion. Does your place of employment enforce certain policies to protect confidential and protected health information? Does your employer provide adequate training to ensure you are aware of what information must be protected and the appropriate ways to share confidential and protected health information? I know in my introductory discussions, I put in the fact that my employer actually requires us to take a monthly test to ensure that we are very knowledgeable on this topic. And lastly, have you received any notices identifying you as a person whose primary or whose PHI may have been unlawfully obtained by a third party? Were you one of the, in the previous slide, we identified that 78.8 million were potentially affected through the violation by Anthem. Were you one of those 78.8 million? And here is a list of references for pages that I used to do this presentation. Thank you very much.